He never followed a single command, until the day he chose a man no one else could reach. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? And if you believe some souls don't need words to be saved, just presence, stay with this story. The training yard smells like dust and metal, baked under a late afternoon sun that hangs low over the California hills, casting long shadows across the gravel. And in the center of it all stands a dog no one wants to stand near. His name is Rook, a German shepherd with a coat dark as burnt earth and eyes that don't settle on anything for long, like he's listening to something far away that no one else can hear. And today, just like every day before, he refuses to move. Heel. The handler calls out, voice sharp, practiced, controlled, but Rook doesn't flinch, not a twitch of muscle, not a flick of the ear, just stillness, heavy and deliberate, like a statue placed where a dog used to be. And around them, the other Marines exchange glances, the kind that don't need words because everyone already knows the verdict. Untrainable. That's the word they use now, passed quietly between reports and coffee breaks, written in clean ink across official forms that don't capture the weight of it. Because AK-9 like Rook isn't supposed to fail, not after the kind of training he went through, not after the missions he once walked into without hesitation. But something changed, and no one can quite point to when. The handler tries again, firmer this time, stepping closer, boots crunching against gravel. Rook, heel. But the dog doesn't respond, doesn't even look at him. And the silence that follows stretches just long enough to feel uncomfortable, like standing in a room where something important has just been lost, but no one wants to admit it out loud. A clipboard snaps shut somewhere off to the side, a sigh carried by the breeze. And then the command comes down, simple and final, pull him out. Just like that. No anger, no drama, just the quiet end of usefulness. And Rook is led away not because he resists, but because he doesn't care enough to resist, his paws moving in slow, measured steps, head level, eyes distant, like he's already somewhere else entirely. They bring him to the edge of the yard, near the chain-link fence that hums faintly in the heat, and tie him off to a post that's seen too many dogs come and go, some promoted, some retired, some forgotten. And as the rest of the unit returns to their routines, the yard fills again with the rhythm of commands, barks, boots, and whistles, a system that works because everything inside it follows the rules, everything except him. Rook sits, not out of obedience, but out of choice. His ears tilt slightly, catching sounds others ignore. The distant rumble of a truck on the highway half a mile away, the soft clink of a canteen swinging against a Marine's hip, the steady pulse of a world that moves forward whether you belong to it or not. And for a long moment, that's all there is. Then the gate creaks open. It's a small sound, almost lost under the noise of training. But Rook's head lifts just a fraction, not sharply, not with alertness, but with something quieter, something closer to recognition, even though he hasn't seen the man who just walked in. Ethan Cole steps onto the gravel like someone who doesn't expect to be noticed, his boots worn but clean, his posture straight out of habit rather than command, and the sun catches the edge of his right arm, where his sleeve is rolled just enough to reveal ink against skin. A faded tattoo of a dog. Simple lines, nothing flashy, but carried like something heavier than memory. He pauses just inside the gate, taking in the yard without really seeing it, the way a man does when his thoughts are somewhere else entirely, somewhere quieter, maybe darker, and for a second, it looks like he might turn around and leave, like this place is just another stop he didn't need to make. But then he exhales, slow and measured, and steps forward. No one calls out to him. No one asks why he's here. The training continues, indifferent, efficient, and yet, across the yard, something shifts. Rook stands. Not abruptly, not with urgency, but with intention, his body unfolding from stillness like he's been waiting for a signal no one else heard. And for the first time all day, his eyes fix on something real. Ethan doesn't notice at first. He walks along the edge of the yard, hands loose at his sides, gaze lowered, passing by rows of kennels and training equipment that carry the faint scent of oil and sweat, the kind of place built for purpose, not comfort. And maybe that's why he fits into it so easily, like a piece that belongs but doesn't quite connect anymore. He stops near the fence without knowing why, his attention caught by nothing in particular, just a feeling, subtle but persistent, like being watched in a room that should be empty. And when he finally looks up, Their eyes meet. No bark, no growl, no command. Just a moment, suspended, fragile, and somehow heavier than all the noise around it. Because in that silence, something passes between them that no one else can see. Something that doesn't need language or training or approval. Something that simply is. Rook takes one step forward, the chain pulling taut for a second before Slack returns, and then another, slow, deliberate, as if testing the space between them, and Ethan doesn't move, doesn't call out, doesn't even seem surprised, just stands there with that same quiet weight in his chest that he's carried for longer than he cares to measure, and for reasons he can't explain, he doesn't look away. Around them, the world continues, commands shouted, dogs responding, boots hitting ground in steady rhythm. But in that small pocket of stillness by the fence, none of it matters, because for the first time in a long time, neither of them feels completely invisible. And sometimes, that's where everything begins. The air does not change, not in any way anyone else would notice, but something settles between them like a quiet understanding that does not need permission to exist, and for a moment, Ethan forgets where he is, forgets the weight he carried through the gate, because the dog in front of him is not looking at him the way people do, not with expectation, not with judgment, but with something steady, something patient, as if it has been waiting without knowing what it was waiting for until now. Ethan shifts his weight slightly, gravel pressing under his boots, the faint crunch grounding him back into the present, and still, the dog does not break eye contact, does not blink, does not move in any way that suggests uncertainty, only presence, and it is that presence that unsettles him more than anything else. He has been seen before by doctors, by officers, by people who spoke in careful tones and measured words. But this is different, because there is no analysis here, no attempt to fix or label or explain, just a quiet recognition that lands deeper than he expects. Somewhere behind him, a whistle cuts through the air, sharp and commanding, followed by the synchronized movement of another K9 unit responding instantly, efficiently, like a system that still works the way it was designed to, and Ethan glances over his shoulder for half a second, just enough to remind himself that this place runs on structure, on obedience, on clear lines between command and response. But when he looks back, the dog is still there, unchanged, waiting without asking for anything in return. A handler approaches from the side, clipboard tucked under his arm, eyes flicking between Ethan and the dog with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You might want to keep your distance," he says, voice low but firm, the kind of warning that has been repeated enough times to lose its urgency. He does not respond well, and Ethan nods slightly, not out of agreement, but out of habit, because nodding is easier than explaining that he is not sure what responding well is supposed to look like anymore. The handler continues, shifting his stance as if preparing to step in if necessary. "He used to be one of our best, top-tier detection, sharp instincts, clean execution. Then one day, it just stopped. No aggression, no obvious trigger, just nothing." And he gestures lightly toward the dog, as if the absence itself is something visible, something that can be pointed to and understood. But Ethan does not look away from Rook, does not break the thin line that has formed between them, because something in that stillness feels familiar in a way he cannot quite name. "We tried retraining, new handlers, different environments." The handler continues, voice flattening into the rhythm of a report. He ignores commands, does not engage, like he is choosing not to be here. And that word lingers for a second longer than the others. Choosing, because it suggests intention, and intention suggests awareness. And awareness means this is not failure in the way they understand it. And Ethan feels something tighten slightly in his chest at that thought, because he knows what it means to be present but not participating, to hear the world calling for response and still remain still. The handler exhales, glancing down at his clipboard before adding quietly, "We are considering pulling him from the program." And there is no weight in the statement, no emotion, just a conclusion that has already been reached somewhere higher up the chain. And for a moment, the word pulling feels heavier than it should, like removing something not because it is broken, but because it no longer fits the system it was built for. Ethan finally looks down, just briefly, his gaze falling to his right arm where the ink rests against his skin, the outline of a dog that once had a name. once had a presence that filled space in a way that made everything else feel quieter, and he does not touch it, does not need to, because the memory is already there, steady and uninvited. And when he looks back up, Rook has taken another step forward, slow and deliberate, the chain shifting softly against the post with a faint metallic sound that barely registers against the noise of the yard. There is no tension in the dog's posture, no sign of agitation or confusion, just a quiet insistence that does not push, does not demand, only exists, and Ethan feels the urge to step back, not out of fear, but because this kind of attention is unfamiliar now, heavier than it used to be, but he does not move, because something in him recognizes that stepping away would break something fragile, something that has not fully formed yet. The handler watches closely, eyes narrowing slightly, waiting for a reaction that never comes, and after a few seconds, he shifts again, uncertainty creeping into his posture for the first time. That is new. He mutters under his breath, almost to himself, because this is not how the dog behaves, not with anyone. Not since whatever changed him took hold. And yet here he is, moving without command, closing distance without hesitation, as if the rules that govern everything else in this place do not apply in this small, quiet space by the fence. Ethan exhales slowly, the sound barely audible, and without fully thinking about it, he takes a single step closer, reducing the space between them to something that feels intentional rather than accidental. And Rook stops, not because he is told to, but because the distance is now enough, because whatever measure he is using has been met, and they stand there, close but not touching, connected by something that does not have a name in any manual or report. The sun dips lower, casting a softer light across the yard, turning sharp edges into something warmer, and for a brief moment, the noise fades just enough that Ethan can hear his own breathing, steady but deeper than before, and beneath it, something else, quieter, like the beginning of a rhythm he has not felt in a long time, something that does not fix anything, does not solve the weight he carries, but sits beside it without trying to move it, and in that stillness, he realizes that for the first time in a long time, he is not trying to leave. The light continues to soften as the sun lowers behind the hills, stretching shadows across the training yard until everything feels quieter, less defined, like the edges of the world are gently being pulled back, and in that fading warmth, Ethan remains where he is, not because he has decided to stay, but because leaving no longer feels automatic, and that alone is unfamiliar enough to hold him still. Rook does not move either, his posture calm, balanced, not rigid like before, but not relaxed in the way most dogs would be. Something in between, something watchful without tension, and it is that balance that begins to draw attention. Across the yard, one of the younger Marines slows his pace, glancing over with a slight frown, nudging the handler beside him, and within seconds, a few more eyes shift in the same direction, subtle at first, then more obvious, because anyone who has spent more than a day around Rook knows what he does not do, and right now, he is doing something entirely different. The handler who spoke earlier steps a little closer again, not intervening, just observing, his clipboard forgotten at his side, because there is no protocol for this. No line in the manual that explains what it means when a dog that ignores everything suddenly chooses to focus, and not on a command, not on a signal, but on a person. Ethan notices the attention only peripherally, like background noise that does not quite reach him, because his awareness is fixed on something much smaller, much quieter, the slow, steady rhythm of the dog's breathing, the subtle shift of weight in his stance, the way his ears adjust not to the chaos of the yard, but to him, and it is that detail that settles deeper than anything else, because it feels intentional in a way that cannot be taught. He exhales again, slower this time, and for reasons he cannot explain, he speaks, his voice low, almost unsure of itself, like it has not been used for anything that mattered in a long time. You do not listen, do you? And the words hang there, simple, without expectation, not a command, not even a question that requires an answer, just something placed gently into the space between them, and Rook tilts his head slightly, not in confusion, not in curiosity, but in acknowledgement, as if the sound itself carries meaning beyond the words. And for a brief second, Ethan feels something shift inside him, something small but undeniable. The handler's breath catches just enough to be heard, a quiet reaction he does not try to hide. Because this is new, not just the dog's movement, but the response, the subtle engagement that has been absent for weeks, maybe longer, and he takes another step closer, careful, measured, not wanting to disrupt whatever this is. He has not reacted to voice in a long time. He says quietly, more to himself than to Ethan, but the words still reach him, still land somewhere in the back of his mind, adding weight to the moment without breaking it. Ethan does not respond to the handler, does not turn away from Rook, because the connection feels too fragile to divide his attention, and instead, he shifts his hand. Slightly, not reaching out. Not yet, just letting it rest more openly at his side. The sleeve pulled back enough that the tattoo is fully visible now. Dark lines against pale skin, worn but clear, and Rook's gaze drops for the first time, following that movement, settling on the ink with a focus that feels almost deliberate. There is no sudden reaction, no excitement, just a quiet stillness that deepens, as if something has been recognized, something that does not need explanation, and Ethan feels it before he understands it, a faint tightening in his chest, not pain, not quite memory, but something close, something that sits just beneath the surface and does not push forward unless invited. He swallows once, steadying his breath, and without thinking, he lowers his hand a few inches, not enough to touch, just enough to close the space slightly, and Rook responds in kind, stepping forward with the same slow, deliberate motion, stopping again at a distance that feels chosen rather than imposed, and for a moment, the world narrows to that space between them, measured not in feet or inches, but in something harder to define. A breeze moves through the yard, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant asphalt, brushing lightly against Ethan's face, and he closes his eyes for just a second, a reflex more than a decision. But when he opens them again, Rook is still there, unchanged, steady, and it is that consistency that settles something inside him, something that has been restless for longer than he cares to admit. "You are still here," he murmurs, the words quieter now, almost a statement to himself, and Rook does not move, does not need to, because presence is already enough. Behind them, the handler finally speaks again, his voice softer now, stripped of the earlier certainty. He is not supposed to do this, and there is no frustration in it, only confusion, maybe even a hint of something else, something closer to hope, though he does not say it out loud. Ethan hears it, registers it, but it does not pull him away, because whatever is happening here does not feel like something that needs to be corrected or explained. It simply exists, and that is enough. The sun dips lower still, the light turning golden, stretching long across the gravel, and in that quiet shift of day into evening, Ethan takes one more step forward, slow, careful, and this time, when he lifts his hand, it is not tentative, not uncertain, just steady, and he holds it there, palm open, not asking, not commanding, simply offering, and for a moment that feels longer than it should, Rook does not move, his eyes fixed on Ethan's, reading something deeper than motion or sound, and then, just as quietly as everything else has happened, he leans forward, closing the final inches, not fully, not yet, but enough that the space between them no longer feels empty, and in that small, almost invisible shift, something begins that neither of them has the words to explain, but both of them understand. The distance between them disappears not with movement, but with permission, quiet and unspoken, and when Rook finally lowers his head just enough to brush the edge of Ethan's open palm, it is not a gesture of obedience, not a trained response, but something slower, something chosen, and Ethan feels it instantly, the warmth of fur against skin, the steady presence of something alive and aware, something that does not demand anything from him in return, and for a moment, he forgets to breathe. The contact is light, almost cautious, as if the dog is measuring not just the space, but the weight of the man in front of him, and Ethan does not move, does not close his hand, does not break the moment by turning it into something more than it is, because instinct tells him that this is not something to take, only something to receive. Around them, the yard begins to quiet as training cycles wind down, commands fading into scattered conversations, boots slowing, equipment being gathered, but the small circle they stand in remains untouched by it, as if time itself has chosen to step aside for a few seconds longer. The handler watches closely now, his earlier caution replaced by something more careful, more attentive, because this is no longer a simple anomaly, no longer something to dismiss or categorize, and he takes another step closer, lowering his voice instinctively. He has not done that, he says, almost in disbelief. Not since before. And he does not finish the sentence, because whatever came before is not something easily explained, not something that fits neatly into a report. Ethan finally exhales, slow and controlled, and without looking away from Rook, he shifts his fingers slightly, just enough to feel the texture of the dog's coat, thick and coarse under his touch, real in a way that grounds him more than anything else has in a long time. And for a second, his eyes soften, not with relief, not with joy, but with something quieter, something closer to recognition. "You are not broken," he murmurs, the words barely audible, and it is not clear whether he is speaking to the dog or to himself, because in this moment, the line between them feels thinner than it should. Rook does not pull away, does not flinch, does not react in any way that suggests uncertainty. Instead, he remains exactly where he is, leaning just enough into Ethan's hand to acknowledge the contact without surrendering to it, a balance that feels deliberate, controlled, and entirely his own. A faint breeze moves through again, carrying the scent of cooling earth and distant ocean air, and somewhere beyond the fence, a truck passes, its low hum blending into the background, steady and distant, like a reminder that the world continues even when moments like this feel suspended outside of it. Ethan becomes aware of his surroundings again slowly, the weight of the yard returning piece by piece, the presence of others, the expectation of movement, of decision, and for the first time since he stepped through the gate, he considers what comes next, but the thought does not settle, does not form into anything concrete, because leaving still does not feel like the right answer. The handler clears his throat softly, careful not to startle either of them. "We can give you space," he offers, though the statement carries uncertainty, because space is not something usually given in a place like this. It is something controlled, measured, assigned, and yet, here he is, offering it without instruction, without clearance, as if he understands that whatever is happening cannot be rushed or directed. Ethan nods once, small and almost absent, not as a request, not as a command, just acknowledgement, and the handler steps back, motioning quietly for the others nearby to do the same, their curiosity still present but tempered now by something closer to respect, because even without understanding it, they can feel that this is not a moment to interrupt. Rook shifts his weight slightly, adjusting his stance, but does not break contact, does not move away, and Ethan mirrors the stillness, his hand remaining where it is, steady, open, patient, and for a few seconds longer, nothing changes, nothing needs to. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, Rook lifts his head, easing back just enough to create space again, not a retreat, not a withdrawal, but a reset, as if the connection has been acknowledged and does not need to be held constantly to remain real. Ethan lowers his hand at the same pace, not chasing the contact, not trying to prolong it beyond its natural end, because something in him understands that forcing it would change it, would turn it into something else entirely, and that is not what this is meant to be. The golden light fades further, shadows deepening across the yard, and the sounds of the day begin to settle into the quieter rhythm of evening. And in that shift, Ethan takes a small step back, just enough to create a different kind of distance, one that allows him to see the dog not just as something close, but as something separate again, something with its own presence, its own choice. Rook watches him, steady, unchanged, his gaze following not with dependency, but with awareness, and for the first time, Ethan notices it clearly. This is not a dog waiting for direction, not a partner waiting for command. This is something else entirely, something that chooses where to stand, when to move, and most importantly, who to trust. The handler speaks again, quieter now, almost careful with his words. "If you are interested, we could run a simple evaluation tomorrow." And the suggestion hangs lightly in the air, not an order, not even a formal request, just a possibility, and Ethan does not answer immediately, because the word tomorrow feels distant, abstract, something that belongs to a version of himself that plans ahead, that commits, and he is not sure he is that person right now. Instead, He looks at Rook again, meeting that steady gaze, and something in him shifts, small but undeniable, like the first step of something that has not fully formed yet. And without fully deciding, he nods once, barely perceptible. "I will be here," he says quietly, and the words settle between them with a weight that feels different from everything that came before, because this time, it is not just presence, it is intention. And Rook, without moving, without reacting in any visible way, holds that moment with the same quiet understanding, as if he has been waiting for it all along. Morning arrives without ceremony, a pale gray light stretching across the training yard as the air carries a faint chill, the kind that lingers just long enough to wake the senses without discomfort. And when Ethan steps through the gate again, the gravel sounds the same beneath his boots, steady and familiar, but something inside him does not feel the same as yesterday. Not lighter, not fixed, just present in a way it has not been for a long time. The yard is quieter this early, the usual rhythm not yet in full motion. Only a few handlers moving between kennels, the soft clink of metal bowls, the low murmur of voices not meant to carry, and in the distance, the faint hum of traffic beginning its daily pattern beyond the base. Ethan does not look around much as he walks in, his path almost instinctive now, drawn toward the far edge of the yard where the fence stands, where the space opens just enough to feel less confined, and before he even reaches it, he sees him. Rook is already there, sitting near the same post, not tied tight this time, just enough slack in the chain to allow movement, and his posture is different, not tense, not distant, but aware, as if he has been waiting, not in the way of expectation, but in the way of recognition. Their eyes meet again, and there is no hesitation, no pause to reestablish anything, because whatever formed yesterday did not disappear overnight. It simply remained, quiet and steady, like something that does not need to be proven twice. Ethan slows his steps as he approaches, not out of caution, but out of respect for the space between them, and Rook stands, mirroring the movement with the same measured calm, neither rushing nor holding back, just aligning himself with the moment as it unfolds. "You came back," Ethan says softly, the words almost unnecessary, but they leave his lips anyway, carried by a breath that feels steadier than it did the day before, and Rook tilts his head just slightly, not questioning, not reacting, just acknowledging the sound, the presence behind it, the weight of it. Footsteps approach from behind, deliberate but unhurried, and the handler from yesterday steps into view, a travel mug in one hand, clipboard tucked under the other arm, his expression more focused now, less skeptical, but still careful, as if he is stepping into something he does not fully understand but is willing to observe. "We kept him here," he says quietly, nodding toward Rook, did not want to disrupt whatever this is. And there is something different in his tone, not authority, not even instruction, just a kind of respect that has replaced the earlier certainty, and Ethan nods once in return, his attention never fully leaving the dog in front of him. "We will keep it simple," the handler continues, setting the mug down on a nearby crate. "Basic engagement, no pressure, just observation." And the words feel less like a plan and more like a suggestion, because even he seems to understand that structure may not apply the same way here. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small rubber ball, worn from use but intact, and holds it loosely in his hand, glancing at Ethan before stepping a few feet to the side, creating space between them. "He used to respond to this," he adds, tossing the ball gently across the yard, where it lands with a soft thud and rolls a short distance before coming to rest near a patch of dry grass. The movement is simple, familiar, something that has triggered instinct in countless dogs before, but Rook does not move, does not even glance in that direction, his attention remaining fixed on Ethan, steady and unwavering. And the handler exhales softly, not surprised, but still noting it, as if confirming something he already suspected. "Your turn," he says, stepping back, giving Ethan a clear line, not instructing him what to do, just allowing the moment to unfold. Ethan looks at the ball for a second, then back at Rook, and something about the situation feels almost misplaced, like the expectation of a response that belongs to a different kind of bond, a different kind of dog, and instead of repeating the action, instead of trying to recreate a reaction that does not belong here, he does something simpler. He takes a few steps forward, away from the fence, not toward the ball, not toward any objective, just walking, slow and steady. And for a brief second, nothing happens, the space behind him remaining still, unchanged. But then he hears it, the soft, measured sound of paws against gravel, not rushed, not hesitant, just following. He does not turn immediately, does not break the moment by checking too soon, because something in him already knows, and when he finally glances over his shoulder, Rook is there, a few feet behind, matching his pace, not because he was told to, not because he was trained to, but because he chose to move when Ethan moved, and the simplicity of it lands deeper than any command ever could. The handler watches from the side, silent now, his earlier notes forgotten, because this is not something that fits into columns or categories. This is something else entirely, something that does not respond to control but to presence, and he feels it, even if he cannot explain it. Ethan stops after a few steps, turning fully this time, and Rook stops as well, not crowding him, not pulling ahead, just holding position, and for a second, they stand there again, facing each other in the open space of the yard, no fence between them now, no chain pulling tight, just distance chosen by both sides. "You are not following commands," Ethan murmurs, almost to himself. "You are following me." And the realization settles quietly, without weight, without pressure, just clarity, and Rook's gaze remains steady, as if confirming what does not need to be said out loud. The morning light grows warmer as the sun rises higher, casting a soft glow across the yard, and in that gentle shift, something becomes clear to everyone watching, even if they cannot name it. This is not a dog being retrained. This is not a man fixing something broken. This is something quieter, something slower, something built not on instruction, but on understanding, and in that understanding, something begins to take shape, something that does not need to be forced, only allowed. The rhythm of the yard continues to build as the morning settles into full light, but the space around Ethan and Rook remains quietly detached, as if the rest of the world has agreed, without speaking, to move around them instead of through them. And as Ethan stands there, feeling the weight of something unfamiliar but steady, he becomes aware that this is no longer just observation, no longer just curiosity from the others watching. This is becoming something that expects an answer, even if no one says it out loud. The handler shifts again, stepping closer but not too close, careful not to interrupt the fragile balance that has formed, his voice low, measured. "Let us try something else," he says, not as a command, but as a suggestion placed gently into the moment, and Ethan nods once, not because he knows what to do, but because he is willing to remain present long enough to find out. The handler gestures toward a small training lane marked by faded cones about 20 yards ahead, the ground there slightly smoother, worn down by repetition, by drills that rely on predictability, on response, on control, and for a second, Ethan hesitates, not because of the distance, but because stepping into that space feels like crossing from something organic into something structured, something that might demand more than what has been freely given so far. He exhales slowly, then begins to walk, not fast, not with purpose that can be measured, just forward, step by step, and once again, he does not look back immediately, because he already understands the pattern, the quiet agreement that has formed between them, and a second later, the soft sound returns, paws meeting gravel in a steady rhythm that matches his own, not perfectly, not mechanically, but naturally, like two movements finding each other without needing to align exactly. When they reach the edge of the lane, Ethan stops, turning slightly, and Rook stops as well, holding position just off his right side, not too close, not drifting away, simply there, present in a way that feels intentional rather than trained. And for a moment, nothing else happens. The cones stand still. The space remains open, waiting, but not demanding. The handler watches closely now, his attention sharpened, because this is where patterns usually reveal themselves, where behavior either holds or breaks under expectation, and he clears his throat softly. "Try a direction change," he suggests, again careful with his tone, as if aware that too much pressure might unravel what has taken shape so quietly. Ethan nods faintly, then shifts his weight, turning to the left without signaling, without calling out, just moving. And for half a second, there is only the sound of his own step, the slight crunch of gravel, the shift of air, and then Rook follows, adjusting smoothly, not snapping into position, not correcting sharply, just flowing into the new direction as if he had already anticipated it. And the handler's eyes narrow slightly, not in doubt, but in focus, because this is not coincidence. This is something else. They walk a few more steps. Then Ethan slows, almost stopping, testing the space again, and Rook mirrors it, reducing pace without overshooting, without confusion, holding that same quiet distance, and it becomes clear, not just to Ethan, but to anyone watching, that this is not obedience in the traditional sense. This is awareness. This is attention that is not tied to command, but to presence, to something deeper than instruction. A breeze moves through again, lifting a bit of dust along the edge of the lane, carrying with it the faint scent of sun-warmed earth, and Ethan feels it brush against his face, grounding him further into the moment. And without thinking, he speaks again, softer now, more certain. "You are not waiting for me to tell you what to do." And the words settle between them, simple, but heavier than they sound, because they carry recognition, and Rook's ears shift slightly, catching the tone, the weight, not the content, and he remains steady, unchanged, as if confirming what has already been understood. The handler steps back another pace, giving them more room, his earlier need to guide replaced by a growing realization that guidance might not apply here. And for the first time, he says nothing, allowing silence to do what instruction cannot. Ethan takes another step forward, then another, then stops abruptly, not as a test, but as a feeling, and Rook halts with him, not instantly, not delayed, but in sync, like a second heartbeat catching up to the first, and the simplicity of it lands deeper than any structured drill ever could. Across the yard, a few more Marines have gathered at a distance, their conversations quieter now, their movements slower, because even without fully understanding it, they can feel that something is happening here that does not belong to routine, something that cannot be forced into a checklist or evaluated with standard metrics. Ethan turns again, facing Rook fully this time, and for a brief moment, the space between them feels different, not empty, but charged with something that has not yet fully revealed itself. And he studies the dog's eyes, searching not for answers, but for alignment, for that same quiet recognition that has been there since the first moment, and it is still there, unchanged, steady, patient. "You see it too, do not you?" he murmurs, the words almost lost in the air, and Rook does not respond in any visible way, does not need to, because the answer is already present in the way he stands, in the way he chooses to remain, in the way he follows not out of duty, but out of something that feels closer to understanding. The sun climbs higher, the light sharpening again, shadows shortening, and the world begins to return to its usual pace. But for Ethan, something has shifted in a way that cannot be undone, something small but undeniable, like a door that is opened just enough to let light through. And as he stands there in the center of the lane, with no command given and none required, he realizes that this is not about teaching the dog how to respond. It is about learning how to be seen. And in that realization, something deeper begins to take shape, something that does not ask for control, only for honesty, and Rook, steady and silent beside him, remains exactly where he chooses to be. The realization does not arrive all at once. It settles slowly, like dust in sunlight, almost invisible until it begins to shape the air itself. And as Ethan stands there in the training lane, with Rook beside him not as a subject, but as a presence, something begins to shift beneath the surface of what everyone thought they understood about this dog, about behavior, about failure. The handler, who has been silent longer than usual, finally steps forward, not to interrupt, but to speak into the space with a tone that carries more thought than instruction. He is not ignoring commands. He says quietly, almost as if saying it out loud is a discovery rather than a statement, and the words hang there for a moment, testing their own weight. He is choosing not to respond to them. The distinction is small on paper, but in the yard, in the space between Ethan and Rook, it feels enormous, because it shifts everything from malfunction to intention, from broken to selective, and Ethan hears it, not as something new, but as something confirmed, something he has already felt without needing to name. Rook shifts slightly at his side, not reacting to the words, but to the tone behind them, the shift in understanding, and his posture remains steady, balanced, aware, as if he has always been this way. and only now are others beginning to see it clearly. The handler continues, stepping a little closer, his voice lower now, more reflective. We kept trying to correct him, to bring him back to what he was trained to do, but maybe that is not the problem. And he pauses, glancing at Ethan, then back at the dog. Maybe he just stopped trusting what we were asking him to do. The idea lands differently than anything said before, because it does not blame the dog, does not reduce him to a system failure, but instead suggests something deeper, something that cannot be measured in drills or commands, and Ethan feels it settle into place with a quiet certainty. He looks at Rook again, really looks this time, not at the surface, not at the posture or the movement, but at the stillness behind it, the awareness that has been there from the beginning, and he understands something he did not have words for before. This is not a dog that forgot how to listen. This is a dog that decided when to listen, and more importantly, who to listen to. You are not confused, Ethan says softly, the words steady now, grounded in something more than observation. You just stopped believing. And the statement is not an accusation, not even a conclusion, just recognition. And for a brief second, Rook's ears shift, his gaze sharpening slightly, not in reaction, but in alignment, as if the truth of the words carries a frequency he understands. Around them, the Marines who had gathered begin to exchange quieter glances, the kind that come when something familiar no longer fits the way it used to, when the explanation they relied on no longer holds, and the handler exhales slowly, nodding once, almost to himself. That would explain it, he murmurs, and for the first time, there is no frustration in his voice, only a kind of acceptance, a willingness to see the situation differently. Ethan takes a small step forward again, not testing, not directing, just moving, and Rook follows, the same measured pace, the same quiet awareness, and it becomes clearer with each step that this is not coincidence, not a temporary anomaly. This is a pattern, but not the kind that can be trained, the kind that emerges when two things recognize something in each other that does not need to be taught. They walk a few yards, then Ethan stops, turning slightly, and Rook adjusts with him, maintaining that consistent distance, neither closing in nor drifting away, and the balance of it feels intentional, almost precise, like a conversation without words, where each movement is both statement and response. The handler watches closely, his earlier need to guide replaced entirely by observation, and after a moment, he speaks again, quieter now, more certain. He is not reading commands, he says, he is reading you. And the words settle into the air with a clarity that no longer needs to be tested. Ethan does not respond immediately, because the idea is not surprising, not after everything he has felt since stepping into this space. But hearing it out loud gives it shape, gives it weight. And for a moment, he considers what that means, not just for the dog, but for himself, because being read, truly seen, is not something he has allowed in a long time. He glances down briefly at his right arm, at the faded tattoo that has been with him through everything, a symbol of something lost, something that once understood him without effort, without expectation, and when he looks back up, Rook is already watching him, steady, patient, as if nothing has changed, as if everything has always been this way. You do not need commands, Ethan says quietly, more certain now. You need something real, and the words are simple, but they carry a truth that settles deeper than anything else has, because they apply not just to the dog, but to him as well. The wind shifts again, carrying a warmer current now as the day continues to unfold, and in that subtle change, something becomes clear to everyone present, even if they cannot fully articulate it. This is not a failure being corrected. This is a connection being revealed, something that was always there, waiting for the right conditions to surface. Ethan takes another step, then another, not leading, not guiding, just moving forward, and Rook follows, steady and quiet, not because he is told to, not because he is trained to, but because he has chosen to remain, and in that choice, something stronger than obedience begins to take shape, something that cannot be commanded, only understood. The understanding settles deeper now, not as a conclusion, but as something lived in real time, something that breathes between them with each step. And as Ethan continues forward, no longer testing, no longer questioning, he begins to notice the subtle ways Rook responds to things that are never spoken, things that exist beneath words, beneath movement, in the quiet spaces most people overlook. A shift in Ethan's shoulders, almost imperceptible, and Rook adjusts his distance by a few inches, not closing in, not pulling away, just aligning, as if the space between them has its own language, its own rhythm, and he is fluent in it. The handler remains still now, no longer offering suggestions, no longer trying to guide the process, because it has become clear that guidance would only interrupt what is unfolding naturally. And the Marines watching from a distance have grown quieter, their earlier curiosity replaced by something closer to respect, because even without understanding it, they can feel that this is not a drill, not a demonstration, but something far more personal. Ethan slows his pace again, not deliberately, just because something inside him tightens slightly, a familiar weight pressing against his chest, the kind that usually builds without warning, the kind he has learned to ignore rather than face. And for a moment, his breath shifts, just enough to break the steady rhythm he has found. Rook notices immediately, not with a dramatic reaction, not with urgency, but with precision, his ears angling slightly, his posture adjusting just enough to close the space by a fraction, not enough to overwhelm, just enough to be there, present in a way that does not demand attention, but offers it. Ethan exhales slowly, trying to steady himself, but the feeling lingers, not overwhelming, just persistent, like an echo that does not fully fade, and without realizing it, he stops walking altogether, standing still in the center of the lane, the world around him continuing in quiet motion, but for him, everything narrows again to a single point. Rook steps forward this time, not waiting, not mirroring, but choosing, and the movement is slow, deliberate, until he stands just within reach, close enough that Ethan can feel the warmth of him without needing to look down, and for a moment, nothing happens, no sound, no command, just presence, steady and unwavering. Then, gently, without hesitation, Rook lowers his head and rests it against Ethan's right arm, directly over the faded tattoo, the contact firm but calm, as if he knows exactly where to place it, exactly what it means, and the moment it happens, something inside Ethan shifts in a way he cannot control. His breath catches, not sharply, not painfully, just enough to break through the layer he has built around himself, and his eyes close for a brief second, not out of weakness, but because the sensation is too precise to ignore. The handler sees it, the Marines see it, but no one moves, no one speaks, because something about the moment demands silence, demands space, and for the first time, the yard feels completely still, as if even the wind has paused to let it happen. Ethan does not pull away. He does not reach out either. He simply allows it, allows the weight, the warmth, the presence, and for a second that stretches longer than it should, the noise inside him quiets, not gone, not erased, but softened, like something has stepped between him and it, just enough to give him room to breathe. "How did you know?" He whispers, the words barely formed, not meant for anyone else, not even fully meant for the dog, just something that escapes because it has nowhere else to go, and Rook does not move, does not respond in any visible way, because the answer is not in words, it is in the fact that he is there at all, in the fact that he chose that moment, that place, that exact point of contact without being told. The handler exhales slowly, almost reverently, and though he says nothing, the realization is clear in his expression. This is not training. This is not behavior correction. This is something deeper, something instinctive, something that cannot be taught, because it does not come from instruction, it comes from understanding. Ethan opens his eyes again, his gaze lowering slightly, not fully looking at the dog, but aware of him in a way that feels different now, more grounded, more real, and for the first time, there is no urge to step away, no instinct to close himself off, just a quiet acceptance of what is happening. Rook lifts his head after a few seconds, not abruptly, not hesitantly, just enough to release the contact without breaking the connection, and he steps back half a pace, returning to that steady distance that has defined their interaction from the beginning, and Ethan remains. Still, his breathing more even now, his posture less rigid, as if something has been adjusted from within. The world begins to return slowly, the distant sounds of the yard filtering back in, the movement of others resuming at the edges of awareness, but the space between them remains unchanged, held together by something that no longer needs to be questioned. Ethan looks at Rook again, really looks this time. And there is something different in his expression now, not clarity, not certainty, but trust, small and quiet, but unmistakable. And he nods once, almost imperceptibly, not as a command, not as a signal, just acknowledgement. Rook holds his gaze, steady as ever, and in that shared stillness, something final settles into place, something that has been building since the moment they first saw each other, something that does not need to be proven or explained, because it has already shown itself in the simplest way possible, by being there when it mattered most. The moment does not end the way most people expect moments like this to end. There is no sudden change, no clear line that separates before from after. Only a quiet continuation, as if something invisible has been set in motion and simply chooses to keep going. And as the yard slowly returns to its natural rhythm, Ethan remains where he is for a few seconds longer, not frozen, not uncertain, just allowing the weight of what just happened to settle without forcing it into meaning. The handler finally steps forward again, careful, respectful of the space that still lingers between the man and the dog, his voice softer now, stripped of any authority it once carried. "We have never seen that before," he says, not as a statement to evaluate, but as something closer to acknowledgement, and Ethan nods faintly, not because he agrees or disagrees, but because there is nothing else to say that would not feel like too much. Rook stands beside him, steady as always, not seeking attention, not waiting for instruction, simply present, and in that presence, something feels complete in a way that does not need explanation. The Marines who had gathered begin to drift back to their duties, slowly at first, as if reluctant to fully leave what they just witnessed, but the structure of the day pulls them forward, one by one, until the yard is once again filled with movement, with commands, with the familiar rhythm of training, and yet, something has shifted, something subtle but undeniable, like a quiet understanding that now exists beneath everything else. Ethan finally takes a step, then another, not toward anything specific, just moving, and Rook follows, the same calm, measured pace, no leash, no command, no hesitation, and the simplicity of it no longer surprises anyone who saw what happened, because the pattern is no longer a question, it is a truth that has revealed itself without needing proof. They walk along the edge of the yard, past the fence, past the worn posts and the scattered equipment, and for the first time, Ethan does not feel like a visitor in this place, does not feel like someone passing through, but something closer to belonging, even if he cannot define it yet. The handler walks alongside them for a few steps, then slows, allowing distance to form naturally, and after a moment, he speaks again, quieter than before. "If you want, we can start the paperwork," he says, and the words are simple, practical, grounded in the reality of what this could become, but they do not carry pressure, only possibility, and Ethan hears them, feels their weight, but does not respond immediately, because the idea of ownership, of responsibility, of commitment, is not something he has allowed himself to consider in a long time. He glances down at Rook, who walks beside him with the same steady presence, not looking up for confirmation, not checking for approval, just there, and something about that absence of need settles something inside him, something that has been tense for longer than he can remember. "He is not something to take," Ethan says finally, his voice low, thoughtful. "He is something to meet." And the handler pauses, absorbing the words, then nods slowly, because even if they do not fit into standard language, they feel right in a way that matters more than precision. The sun continues to rise, the light growing stronger, sharper, casting clearer lines across the yard, and with it, the day moves forward, tasks resume, routines take hold, but Ethan and Rook remain slightly outside of it, not disconnected, but not bound by it either, moving within the same space but under a different understanding. They stop near the gate where Ethan first entered, the place that now feels different, not because it has changed, but because he has, and for a moment, he stands there, looking out beyond the fence, at the road, at the world that continues without pause, and he considers leaving, considers stepping back into that familiar distance he has kept from everything for so long. But the thought does not settle the way it used to. It does not feel like relief. It feels like absence. He exhales slowly, then turns back, not dramatically, not with decision that needs to be announced, just a quiet shift of direction, and when he does, Rook is already there, already aligned, already moving with him, not ahead, not behind, just beside, exactly where he chooses to be. The handler watches from a distance now, no longer needing to intervene, no longer needing to understand every detail, because some things do not require full explanation to be respected, and as Ethan walks back into the yard instead of out of it, the meaning of that small choice becomes clear without needing to be spoken. There is no promise made, no declaration of what comes next, only presence, steady and intentional. And in that presence, something deeper than certainty begins to take root, something that does not rely on guarantees, only on the willingness to stay. Ethan slows his pace, then stops once more, turning slightly toward Rook, and for a brief second, their eyes meet again, the same quiet recognition passing between them, unchanged from the very first moment, and he nods once, not as a signal, not as a command, just acknowledgement of something that now exists between them without effort. Rook remains still, steady, his gaze calm, and in that silence, the story does not end. It simply settles into something quieter, something lasting, something that does not need to be understood by everyone to be real. And sometimes that is enough.